Good evening. This beautiful evening, it's 7 o'clock. We're going to start with this Isaka and Norea talk. Thank you all for participation today. My name is Yuri Bobbert. I'll be your host for today. I am the professor at Antwerp Management School, and I'm also welcome you on behalf of the Antwerp Management School in Belgium. We are going to first of all start with some house rules for today. So we have approximately 45 minutes for the webinar, where we have myself and two speakers. During the session, please mute your microphone and put your questions or your remarks in the chat. At the end, we will have a discussion. We'll have sufficient time to have a debate about the presentation that we're given. And please also mute your mic, and if you want to, you can leave your camera on, but it's not an obligation. So first of all, I would like to introduce the Antwerp Management School, because we have today two speakers of the Antwerp Management School. Antwerp Management School already is now for 30 years one of the leading executive master educations in the Benelux when it comes to IT architecture, IT management, and IT governance. And recently also the master in cybersecurity, so an MSc title in cybersecurity management with a focus on leadership. And every year we have approximately 40 executive master students graduating with their master project, so a research project in a specific topic which address a problem either in the business environment or in the academia environment. Today we have two speakers that are going to address that. And out of those executive master projects, we try to make a lot of publications and papers that are relevant for business environments as well. So that's what we hope to do today as well, to present you two very extraordinary research work from Tijl and Geert that was done in the domain of IT that can help you also in your own environment potentially. So two speakers. First is Geert Boelens, then we have Tijl. Both did their master project at the Antwerp Management School. Tijl is going to talk about the cloud. You've read that on the introduction, so a very interesting model and an interesting way to approach new business environment in cloud. And Geert is going to talk about the view on, in this case, the business impact analysis combined with a architecture methodology called DEMO to distinguish the organization, and also how you can improve doing a business impact assessment. So put your questions in the chat. As you know, I'm always here trying to encourage you to put a lot of questions in the chat. And the best questions are rewarded with one of the research books that we've published as Antwerp Management School. So first of all, I would like to give the floor to Geert and then to Tijl, but first Geert. I'm going to unshare now, Geert, so you can take over.
Yeah, thank you. So, is the screen visible?
Yeah.
Perfect. Hello, thank you for joining today's webinar. So to start, I'd like to quickly present myself. So I'm Geert Boelens. I'm working since 20 years in IT application delivery in several roles. Started as developer, then application architect, and now I'm a freelance project manager. I've worked for large enterprises in the retail, media, and financial sectors. In my free time, I enjoy spending time with my family, running, playing board games with friends, and tasting craft beers. How did I start this research journey? Well, I have quite some practical experience, but I wanted a more theoretical understanding of the patterns I learned. And therefore, I decided to follow the Executive Master in Enterprise IT Architecture at the Antwerp Management School, which is a 2-year program, as explained, and I completed this journey in July. It was an intense journey, but absolutely worthwhile, because many fundamental IT theories and frameworks have been developed during my initial graduation. TOGAF in 1995, SAPSA and COBIT in 1996. And following the master degree, well, that requires writing a dissertation. And just finding a subject is an intense project in its own right. I got the cybersecurity microbe after completing a group assignment work. And because as a project manager, I deal with change in an already established landscape, I always need a mental map linking all business processes in my scope to the applications, teams, and underlying infrastructure. And these both worlds of cybersecurity and analysis comes together in business impact analysis, and for me was as an ideal research topic, as it combines both. Let me first set the scene. The BIA is an input to create a business continuity plan. No organization can nullify risks. No matter how much preventative measures are taken, a risk can materialize. And therefore, an organization needs a plan to provide continuity in case of a catastrophic event. The BCP states which services are the most important to recover, first in continuity mode and then going back to normal. And the move back to normal is described in the disaster recovery plan. Incidents happen frequently. 50% of the respondents of a BCI inquiry, so the Business Continuity Institute, in 2019, they stated that they had to declare an emergency at some point. Moreover, research proved that companies who do have a business continuity plan tend to have better financial health in general. So having a BCP makes good sense. Let us dive into the BIA itself. When we look at the business impact analysis, we see that's executed on 3 levels. High-level products and services, then on the second level, processes, and then the third, detailed activity analysis. In the first step, the analysis should list out capabilities, prioritize them, and discuss the risks. Second step is about describing high-level processes within the capabilities, and again, describe dependencies between the capabilities themselves and these processes. At the lowest level, the analyst uncovers the individual activities, dependencies, and resources which realize those activities, such as facilities, teams, raw materials, processes themselves, and IT systems. And the goal is that an organization gets insight in which capabilities to protect and in what order capabilities should be restored. If the BIA is not accurate, it might lead to wrong conclusions for the BCP. For example, a wrong order of restoring services. And this can have severe consequences during a real crisis. My research focused on the darkened area on the slide, which is the prioritization and consolidation part of the BIA. The problem statement of the research is, we know the process and the steps, but there's no guidance on how to execute these steps. And the research aimed to find a set of frameworks and methodologies to assist in this. To explain the analysis artifacts, I'll use a fictional pizzeria as an example. So this pizzeria offers great pizza for takeaway and home delivery. On the screen is a value chain of porter for the pizzeria. The restaurant owner, he heard about a competitor who lost a weekend of sales because of a damaged network device on a Saturday evening. And he then realized he would not know what to do in that case, nor in the case of issues in the kitchen. And therefore, he asked to review the operations and outbound logistics. So let us dive into this. Where shall we start? The ISO document for describing the BIA gives inputs and outputs per phase, but it does not describe how to come to the output. There is no guidance in the body of knowledge neither. Ideally, there would be guidance on how to obtain the business process at a correct level of detail. It should also explain how to relate these business processes to the organization, strategy, and risks, and ultimately to the underlying resources. I found I could meet these requirements by combining SAPSA, Security Architecture Framework, DEMO, Enterprise Ontology Methodology, and Archimate Modeling Language. Let us first start with SAPSA. SAPSA is a business-driven security architecture framework. It collects information about the structure of the enterprise and links it to the risks, control objectives, and control measures. And there are 6 layers in SAPSA. SAPSA contextual layer on top maps to the BIA deliverables concerning business structure, high-level business obligations, risks, products and services, high-level dependencies, and the priorities. And the conceptual layer on the second line maps to the IT strategy and control objectives for risk mitigation. And the logical, physical, and component layers describe the detailed implementation and define the control measures to realize the control objectives. Great. Do we have all relevant info? Well, not yet. SAPSA needs the business process model and business information model as an input. The value chain of Porter shows the activities, but does not show the dependencies nor how these are organized. We need insight in the end-to-end process to discuss the risks. Okay, we should organize interviews with the restaurant owner, but what is the appropriate level of detail we should collect? SAPSA does not give guidance about this. BPMN, as a documentation approach, focuses on process modeling and documenting, but allows any level of detail. Archimate is the same. It is a modeling language. It is not a prescriptive approach to collect information. So what would then be a good approach? And here I found enterprise ontology to give the required guidance. So an enterprise ontology methodology is about describing organizations independent from the implementation. One such methodology is DEMO, which stands for Design and Engineering Methodology for Organizations. And DEMO produces a top-down analysis of the processes and data entities in an organization. The starting point in enterprise ontology states that there are 3 layers. The O organization on top is where the interactions happen to produce the original products and services, hence the O. Every transaction creates information. The I organization is about these facts produced by both coordination and the original products. And these facts are the business data entities. And the D organization is about recording these facts. This can be on paper, electronic, or even word of mouth. For those who know object-oriented design, DEMO focuses on the class design, not on the implementation or instantiation of these classes. The implementation or instantiation will be found in organization charts, legal entity structures, locations, and CMDBs. What we do now is to focus on the O organization or performer layer, where the added value activities happen. So the organization uses a series of transactions to realize the mission. A transaction is the coordination activity to obtain a product or a service. You see 2 parties involved, the initiator and executor. The initiator is the customer in a transaction, and she expresses the desire to obtain a product or service. The executor delivers this. They both need to interact for the transaction to succeed, which is the coordination activity. And the transaction kind symbol has a circle and a diamond. The circle represents the coordination activity, and the diamond the resulting original product. Both actors are autonomous. They are both allowed to cancel the transaction at any time, meaning before, during, or after delivery. And because of the autonomy of both actors, the transaction contains happy and unhappy flows. We can add the actor roles as rectangles to the organization coordination diagram and link them to the transaction as you see here. Now, let's look at the coordination structure diagram, CSD, for the restaurant. You see the customer role who places an order with the sales completer role. The sales completer role in the middle coordinates several activities such as transferring order to the kitchen, ask for payments, and if required, organize a delivery. The actor roles often require additional information during the execution of a transaction. An example is the customer role who wants to know the address of the pizzeria or the price list. The dotted lines link to the sources of information such as this fact bank here, or other transactions within the process. Here you see the relationship, thus the dependencies between the 2 value streams in scope, which are operations and sales. You also see an additional critical transaction kind, which is the payment. This is the highest level at which DEMO documents an organization. In my use case, I explained this diagram with the interviewees, just like I did now, with you, so that the stakeholders could give feedback on my understanding of their processes. Now comes the time to identify the most critical transaction kind. Usually, one would create a business impact over time diagram. I did this differently for the use cases. What I did was ask two questions. Which is the most important transaction in general? And which ones should be restored first in case everything gets disrupted? For my use cases, I got two clear, distinct transactions. Here, in this example of the restaurant, the restaurant holder would probably give us two transactions. One, the pizza baking, and two, the payment. Because he will say, if there is no pizza, there is no income. And if there is no payment possible, there is no income neither. From the CSD, we can derive the facts of business entities. This is a conceptual business entity model, irrespective of the implementation in the ERP system. Here, we also see the mapping between each original product or service and the business entity it creates or alters. We will apply CIA triad classification for each entity, evaluating for each the confidentiality, integrity, and availability requirements. The third step with demo is documenting the order of execution of the transaction kinds. This is shown in the process structure diagram. The PSD is structured like a Gantt chart. So it shows the transactions and states the order of execution of the transactions. For example, at the start of the sales payment process, you see an arrow which departing to the sales preparation process. The arrow shows PM or promise at the start. This means the customer should promise to pay before the kitchen will prepare the order. The order is only considered complete once all transactions are completed. This is documented with the arrows departing at the end of the three transaction kinds towards the main transaction kind. Can we go into more detail? Yes. Demo allows the deep dive into the happy and unhappy flows inside each transaction kind. But I kept this part out of scope of the BIA use cases because this level of detail is usually not required. Now I got the business process information and diagrams I need for the security analysis with SAPSA. We can create an IT architectural view of the resource types and applications used. How do these artifacts map then into the SAPSA framework? Well, the O organization maps into the contextual layer. The I organization provides the business information model, which feeds the logical layer, and the D organization feeds the physical and component layers. The security analysis can now start. We can review the risks impacting the value streams and scope, and to document the business strategy, I presented the list of SAPSA business attributes to the stakeholders, and we evaluate together what keywords best describe the most important aspects of an organization to protect. And next, I discussed control objectives to mitigate those risks and review control measures on the logical, physical, and component level of the elements in scope. Now, I'm in a Isaka and Norea hosted session speaking about IT strategies and control objectives, and I did not refer a single time to Isaka frameworks such as COBIT and CMMI. Well, the most formal way to obtain relevant control objectives is indeed to perform the business to IT alignment using COBIT. And this will give you governance control objectives, and these you can translate to management practices and eventually also requirements for your infrastructure or architecture. And with CMMI, you could define the desired level of maturity, measuring the existing level of the architecture, and then create a program to achieve the desired level you want. So COBIT can be an input to SAPSA, and CMMI can be used to monitor the implementation. But in my use cases, I focused on implementing the analysis part. And I started from the SAPSA business attributes instead, and agreed on control objectives related to the architecture with the stakeholders. So let's go back to the artifacts. We receive now a lot of information on business, IT systems, risks, and so forth. So how can these be centrally documented in the same way? Let's first look at the business processes themselves. Archimate allows to model the enterprise at business, application, and infrastructure level. And demo diagrams can be translated to a certain extent to Archimate diagrams. And this is the method I use to map demo to Archimate. You see the actual role and demo transaction kind, they map to the business role and business process in Archimate. Both Demo and Archimate know the concept of internal and external roles. In Demo, an external role is marked in gray. In Archimate, external roles connect to the organization via business service. Next, the Demo information entity can be mapped to the business object in Archimate. And because of these mappings, it is possible to translate the CSD, the OFD for the business entities, and to a certain extent the PSD or process structure diagram into the business layer Archimate representation. The business layer can then be linked to the application layer, technology layer, and motivational layer. And where do we capture all the security insights which we collected using SAPSA? There is no security layer in Archimate, but several papers propose to model security elements using the motivation layer. This has worked efficiently in the artifact. First, I list out the risks, I add the threat events and the resulting loss events. Then I model the risk strategy by selecting the appropriate business attributes. I link these to the chosen control objective and to the business, and this to the risk and to the control measures, in which I can then link to the IT landscape. I can also document the gaps between the control measure and the IT landscape in Archimate. What do we assess for the pizzeria? Here is one example of a risk, which is a specific threat event, which is the loss of electricity. This stops the entire operations. The restaurant holder sees availability as a core business security objective. He has an indemnity agreement with a colleague to use his kitchen for baking of pizzas. But this is not sufficient. There is no plan to recover the customer desk, specifically because the enabling devices have no power. And this is represented by the gap. We recommend to build a business continuity plan, which contains a communication plan to the customers, and to look for methods to resume ordering, fulfillment, and payments. The resulting base diagrams become very complex and are not for consumption for the stakeholders. They serve the analysis and consolidation phase of the BIA. I distilled the report from the Demo and Archimate diagrams and put all findings and conclusions together. On the left-hand side, you see the typical cleanup layered Archimate diagram with business processes and related applications modeled. On the right, you see how I presented the security aspects in the report. How did the artifact perform? I tested it with 3 use cases in sequence. I added feedback on efficiency and relevancy after every use case, and then I improved the artifact for the next use case. On the slide, you see a selection of quotes from the last iteration. I managed to keep the number of interviews to a perfectly acceptable level, capturing the relevant information within the agreed scope, and produced the required insights. The artifact produced in each use case a report which showed accurately the most critical processes and the risks the organization is exposed to. And there are a few limitations to the research to consider. First of all, I executed the 3 use cases personally, meaning I did not evaluate scaling out, and it was only tested with a Dutch-speaking community. To summarize, Demo and SAPSA can be used as a guideline to perform the BA process analysis and consolidation. And Demo structures the thinking process of the analyst in such a way she will start with a high-level organization process diagram and helps to stay away from irrelevant details. SAPSA focuses on collecting the risks and then aiding in defining control objectives and control measures, which you could eventually collect from more formal ways via COBIT. To use this approach, there is a learning curve to go through. You need to know the ISO BIA standard, but also SAPSA contextual, conceptual, and logical layers, a working knowledge of the Demo methodology, and preferably Archimate as a modeling language. It is hard work, but look at the robustness of the outcome. Demo is based on scientifically proven theories. The ISO BIA process and SAPSA are mainstream and stable. Archimate is vendor independent. So this investment in knowledge is sound. Thank you for your attention. So I hope you enjoyed this session, and I definitely did. I added references about Demo to the Enterprise Engineering Institute below. I also prepared a handout stating the steps in the BIA process I took and further references. You may request this handout via the QR code, which you see now on the screen, or the URL on the slide. And you may always contact me via LinkedIn, email, or phone. Thank you for your attention. I'm glad to hand over the word to Professor Yuri Bobbert.
Thank you, Geert. I think we already have a couple of very good questions, but we'll keep them till the end because we are now going to listen to Tal about cloud. So Tal, if you are able to share your screen. Yeah.
Yes, voilà. It's visible?
Yes.
Okay, great. So also thanks from my side for joining this session. Today I'd like to share some insights with you on the topic of my research, which centered around how to design a cloud strategy to maximize business value, or you could also put it like how to avoid your journey to the cloud turning into a perfect storm. But before we start about that, maybe since we have the full 20 minutes, let me share you something about one of my hobbies. I like to run, but in fact, I came to the conclusion that I'm a better sprinter than a marathon runner. And I came to the conclusion as follows, in fact. So my goal, it was to finish a marathon. And I knew the constraint. The constraint is easy. It's finishing the marathon in time. And I even had a strategy. The strategy was run hard and fast and all will be fine. So with a lot of good vibes, I started practicing for the marathon. And while I made a lot of progress in the first few weeks, I even managed to get up to 18 kilometers. But then I noticed that it leveled off. And whatever I did, and as you can see, it cost me blood, sweat, and tears. I could not make it past that point. So, what could I do? I had, in fact, three options at that moment in time. I could just keep trying. I could stop trying, which some people call give up, or I could try something else. And as people of my generation do, I went online looking on the internet for clues, and I came across some magical recipes. And one of the first magical recipes, what I found online is to run a marathon, to prepare for it, to train for it, you need good shoes. So I went to a running store and the sales guy there told me, indeed, shoes are important. And that way I ended up with this beautiful pair of shoes. And with a lot of good motivation, I restarted my training journey. And the first moment, and the first day, I just broke my record of 18 kilometers. I managed to get up to 20. But yeah, as you can imagine, a bit later down, 2 weeks later, I noticed I was back to baseline. But okay, there must be other things I can try. So I reverted back to searching and I came across the following. It seems that to really prepare for the marathon, you need a treadmill. It not only provides cushioning, but you can also adapt the inclination, etc. And I went this time to an even more expensive running store, I must say. And also there, the sales guy confirmed, yes, indeed, this is a good way to prepare for the marathon. And same story, same pattern, as you might have guessed, slight improve at the beginning, and then it tapered off again. So, but while being at the running store where I bought the treadmill, I saw a folder about running coaches or running evangelists, as they call themselves. And so I took contact with one of them and they put me on the magic 12-week marathon training plan. And while I learned at that moment that running a marathon, it needs planning, I saw it didn't really work out for me. And the generic way did not take into account things like my personal situation and time I need to spend to work, etc., etc. So also that finally was not really a solution. So at that moment in time, I gave up the my purpose of finishing a marathon, but I did learn something from it. I learned that I might have better thought a little bit more before I started with that engagement. And I also wondered, what is my real motivation to run the marathon? Because if it's just to finish the marathon, I did not find the right motivation. Also, I reflected on things like, can I really put in the time and effort to prepare, and was I realistic about my constraints and also the benefits, because I do running in shorter lapses for a long time, and it keeps me also a little bit healthy. So what would I even do after finishing that one marathon? And also, of course, why did the shoes, the treadmill, and the how to run the marathon plan in 12 weeks did not work? But enough, let's say, about my hobbies, and let's get to the topic of today. So, with a marathon experience in my backpack, I got back to work, and there I noticed an interesting problem. The past few years, a lot of companies started to adopt cloud computing, and I talked to a lot of their IT guys, and they were quite enthusiastic about this whole journey. It would be a blast. But then when I talked to the same people, 1 year or 2 years later, in some cases, they were not that happy anymore, and they told me, "Ha, we are doing great things, we're automating everything through Terraform, and we're even doing making shutdowns of our compute instances after business hours, so we manage costs." But there are those people from the business who keep on asking us, when do we really get the benefits? When do we get business value? And I thought it was quite an interesting problem to find out. And in order to do things a little bit different than with the marathon experience, I decided to first get a good grasp on the problem and the root cause. And while doing that, I in fact found out that there's not like one or two key reasons why these cloud migrations don't bring value. And so it was just X around different domains, like the methodology, technology, also on the transformation and the people domain. It was a somewhat complex problem, let's say. But knowing the different root causes, I thought, okay, that might be a good preparation to start thinking about a solution. So, in fact, as a solution, I want to establish a method, so not a generic recipe, because I think it does not exist, but a method you could follow to engage in a cloud journey and come out of it with maximized business value. And I thought, this artifact, they call it then, might not only be interesting to companies that are starting with their cloud adoption journey or are in the midst of it and try to optimize it. I also thought it could be practical for the typical cloud evangelist. You might see some similarity with the running evangelists, the running coaches, because that's another observation. We're often that passionate about technology, and cloud is a fantastic solution, that we don't totally grasp the whole context around it. So I thought, okay, this is the goal of my artifact, and I had a clear purpose for solving a problem. So when we zoom in fact, into this artifact, I won't go down to each detail, but the high level, you can notice in fact that it does exist of an exploring cycle, a thinking cycle, and a planning one. And you can in fact iterate through them as much as you want to gradually, incrementally define your cloud strategy. And in here, you can see that everything starts in fact with exploring where you are, looking at your current situation. But let's just take a quick look in one of the elements. So it's okay, exploring the current business and IT strategy. And a thing that is quite noticeable is if we look at our legacy landscape, yeah, then we see, as you see depicted at the right hand side, we see our current business model, our current processes, the way we deal with governance, risk, and compliance, not unimportant. And then the infrastructure, the way we deal with data, the applications that run on it, and the processes that glue everything together. But in fact, as you can see on the left-hand side, the shallow iceberg, that's our legacy business model, the thing that makes money. And it is supported by what you can see, in fact, under the waterline, by the IT landscape of systems, applications, and whatnot, that is supporting the legacy business model. And a lot happens under the waterline and is often not visible to the business. So then I also noticed a pattern. A lot of companies are still looking at cloud as a new place to host their legacy infrastructure and applications. And with that mindset, while adopting cloud, you see that there is a lot of work to be done under the waterline. You just swap out what you have for basically a new location, a new data center, and you start doing the same thing all over again. Also, you see that these legacy systems that support the legacy business model, they often don't benefit from the strengths of cloud. They're not built to be compatible with cloud. And you could also make the reflection that a lot of valuable skills, so people, IT people in your company that also know the business, if you invest a lot of their skills and time in building the capabilities and running the typical IT infrastructure, you could wonder, is it really the best way to spend my scarce resources? They have business knowledge and they have IT knowledge. Isn't there a better way to use their skills? And also, while we're starting to build all these capabilities or all these infrastructure and services under the waterline, that's not really what the business seems to mean with business value. And also, a lot of companies are taking that viewpoint, and you can wonder, as a company, what am I really doing different compared to my competitors that no one else is doing? How I can differentiate myself from my competitors? It's obviously not by doing the same thing. And in fact, you can make, if you want to put a mental picture in your head, you can say this way of looking at cloud adoption, it's basically buying a big, nice, shiny, smooth new road, but still keeping the old car on new road. And of course, the journey might be a little bit less wobbly, but at the same time, you will have companies or competitors that not only buy the new road, they also take the time to build a new car, and they will catch up on you or might catch up on you. So if you look at an element of the second cycle, the thinking cycle, you can a little bit depict it as follows. When I take different case companies, I took a look at, or I had a look at together, and I take it to extremes. I must add it. In fact, you can devise two types of companies, and they're depicted here at the right-hand side as the Starfish SA and the Dinosaur Inc. And in fact, these are just two archetypes for two companies, where you see that the dinosaur type of companies, they take this infrastructure approach when it comes to clouds. And they often spend a lot of time under the waterline, and it's not always sure if they will get the time or the money to race above the waterline. So the submarine type of companies. At the same time, we see other companies that think totally different. They think from the business model and how can we innovate our business model or even identify new business models, and by identifying things that have become possible thanks to cloud technology. And then you see it's a totally different way of thinking. And while it may take them a little bit more time to get value, they reach out above the waterline and they keep on making incremental gains and profits. So if you then ask yourself the question, what are the key differences between those rockets versus submarine, those starfish versus dinosaur type of companies? And in fact, you often see a common pattern. So the starfish type of companies, they think from the business perspective and they use IT as a very important enabler, but they don't start thinking from the IT side, they do it from the business side. Also, they consciously avoid to use their in-house IT skills, who have a good business knowledge as well, to do too much work under the waterline. And also they actively foster a culture of exploration where they try new things, where they learn new things. And I don't mean just doing certifications around cloud, really trying out and applying learnings from it. Also, you see that they attract new talent and they mix them up with existing skills to reinforce each other. And basically, they don't use cloud technology to solve things that you could also solve into the legacy systems. They use cloud to solve things that were not possible or way more difficult to solve in the legacy environment. So they solve business problems instead of IT challenges. And also, they basically build solutions that are easy to integrate within their company, but also their ecosystems of customers and suppliers. And they make sure that they can easily reconfigure and recombine current products to make new solutions to offer to their customers. And they also do intentionally, in fact, separate the legacy way of working, legacy business model supported by legacy systems from the innovative approach, but they ensure that you have consistent integration between the two worlds, and not only on a technical level, but also on an organizational level. And basically, it might sound a bit odd, but they do know that cloud is hard before they start. They know what they're up to, and they do have clear and specific purposes. If you make a very quick jump to the other side, to the dinosaur type companies, you often see that cloud, it might be mandated by the C-suite, and they may allocate the budget, but they often leave it up to IT. Also, such a company migrates often the as-is situation to cloud, and they will optimize later, only that later might be far away. So they often end up stuck under the waterline. And they, in fact, focus on optimizing this legacy model and those legacy systems, which is certainly possible. But they think from that perspective. And also, and it's quite an important one, I think, they do not adapt the organization, and they try to upskill instead of reskill their people, in fact. And as a consequence, often they learn cloud is hard only after they start. And then, of course, you can read it everywhere. Cloud can have many benefits, but they're not always as concrete, unless you call things like agility, cost optimization, flexibility, or doing something with AI, very concrete goals, which you can also correctly measure. So these are two things taken to extremes with which those two type of companies do differently. So interesting question maybe is what does explain the difference in approach between those two types of companies. And one of them is basically public cloud is a canvas, and you or your company is the painter. And while we're playing with our kids and building nice castles out of Lego blocks, I think we all realize there is a big difference between subscribing or buying a new cloud service, and in fact getting a shiny but empty cloud and a whole box of Lego bricks with which you can build amazing things, but it's just bricks. And there's a big difference between having the bricks and building the castle. And so that's one element. The second one, in fact, is cloud services. They have no value on its own. It takes really a lot of hard work to turn them into business value. And you can compare that a little bit with traditional industries. They buy steel, wood, stone, whatever, and they apply labor and whatnot to make it into something valuable they can sell with profit to their customers. For cloud, it's a little bit the same. The services in the cloud catalog of a typical hyperscaler, of course, they have tremendous value to the cloud provider, but to you as a company, they're just the raw materials. So companies that are more into the starfish mode, they also realize that cloud itself, it doesn't provide business value. They do realize that cloud is in fact a commodity. And as you can see here, when you combine clouds and electricity, you get a perfect thunderstorm, which we all try to avoid. So, but okay, when will cloud deliver business value? Yeah, that's at the moment that you combine clouds with a whole lot of other ingredients. And not only that, you also apply unique managerial skills, and you make sure you have a mature architecture competence. And with all that at your disposal, you build solutions and services that are valuable, that are difficult to imitate, that cannot easily be reproduced by your competitor. Another thing, that type of companies that follows the starfish approach knows is that they think in capabilities, and they know that sequence matters. They know they need to build IT centered cloud capabilities, but these capabilities are just there to support the business capabilities. And in fact, there are three key things that heavily contribute to creating business value with cloud. It's ensuring that you build business capabilities using cloud technology that allow you to integrate and collaborate within the ecosystem of customers, the whole supplier value chain and whatnot, but also to really get insights into the processes within the company, the competitive landscape, what happens on the market, and also the often quickly changing needs of customers. So they can sense early what's going to happen, but also they make capabilities that allow them to quickly respond if customers needs change, that they can quickly offer new products, etc., etc., etc. And in fact, they do know, of course, that technology, it's only one chapter of the book. The cloud services we saw in the middle. It's just the technology. We need processes, we need skills, technology, and behaviors around it, embedded in an organization to reach, to have a capability. And in fact, you can a little bit depict it as follows. For an organization, it's always good to realize that things which have high value are often quite difficult to develop or to acquire. And you should also wonder, should I build all these capabilities in-house? And then you see you have the technological capability to really manage cloud in a proper way. You need to be able to integrate it in your environment, but only when you start to combine multiple of these capabilities together, and you can really integrate with the portfolio of the cloud provider, but also with other assets of companies in your ecosystem and value network, that you come to a state where you come out above the waterline and can start to speak about, okay, now what we're doing here with cloud, it starts to lead to some business flexibility, but the real high value only comes at the moment that everything you do also starts to reinforce itself. So always take away, it's difficult to build things that have value, and always have good reflection on what do I do myself, and for what do I rely on other commodity providers like you buy your electricity. And in fact, and it's maybe not the most sexy thing to explain or to visualize. Okay, we saw that legacy model and the way we can use a more innovative approach, but can we have the best of both worlds? And there, in fact, as you can see depicted on the following picture, at the right-hand side, you often see the legacy business model enabled by the legacy system, and it's embedded in an operating model. And this is often optimized for being stable, being predictable, but due to the way everything works, the rate of change, how fast you can evolve that legacy landscape, it's rather slow. And decisions there are often driven based on TCO, and it's not really that much of an advantage to really try to do something different on a technology level. At the left-hand side, at the same time, you see innovative business model supported by new and emerging technology, and there the things are different. It's a totally different operating model, which is more optimized for speed. And for instance, you can absorb more technology risk in such a model. But what is key, nevertheless, is always to ensure that things you learn from this approach, that they can be reintegrated to optimize the legacy model, but also that you make sure that things that are very valuable and much needed from the legacy model, like the processes around regulations, risk, etc., that you also apply them in your innovative way of working, but you adapt them, of course, to a different context. The sixth thing is that in a complex world, and I think we can call our world a complex world, it's not a bad idea to have options. I think people that were involved in things related to clouds in the past 2 years, they know this guy on the screen very well, Max Schrems, and it shows that things like a privacy shield, things can often change rather quickly. And while looking at this topic of cloud adoption, it's not only the technology and the cost we should take in mind, but also things that happen in the economic and political landscape. And just to end this small presentation here, I couldn't leave out this quote from Yuval Noah Harari, who basically says, authority will shift back to the clouds, but not to those of the gods this time. It will shift to the clouds of Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. And that's maybe also something to think about. So if you're interested in receiving a handout that applies, in fact, the methods I used in my research, that applies it to real case companies, you can scan the QR, we all know that in the meantime, or visit the URL, and I'll be happy to send you the handouts. And that's about all I wanted to tell you. And thanks a lot for listening. Voilà.
Thank you, Tal, for your presentation. Also, Geert, thank you very much for your clear presentation. We see a huge amount of questions, comments, remarks on both presentations, so that's good. Thank you, everybody, for putting that in the chat. So we have time now to answer a couple of those questions. During the presentation, I already selected a couple of them because, we're also a little bit limited in time. But I want to emphasize on the three most important questions, or the most relevant question that I want to ask, and also on the book. So I want to start first with Gilbert van Zijl. A question for you, Geert. I think it's a really good question. It's about implementing a BIA. You want information from the business, but business often has difficulties to talk and understand these models. We also experience that. What are your ideas of getting those business efficiently involved? And what communication strategies are to be used? Perhaps you can also shed some light on how you did that in your 3 case studies.
Yes. For the cases, what I did was first to set the scope of the BIA together with the person who would give the, let's say, the assignment. And at that time, I know I get also the structure of the organization. The CISO then explains, okay, this and this and this is what we do. And then also go to the public website, even to the web shop if they have, and start collecting information from there and receive IT architecture landscapes, etc., and perhaps even high-level list of business processes. So I can prepare myself for the interviews. We select the people who are the most relevant, happens also with the CISO, and then I go to the meeting, I say, I want information about these processes because of some reviews that have to be done from a security perspective or from a continuity perspective. I go to the meeting and I already give a kind of impression of what I see, how the company works. And then that person can go immediately to explaining a bit more in detail what is happening, and I understand it because the context is already known. Then I document everything, and as he speaks about these processes, I will then also ask the questions about, okay, what are your most important transactions in the scope that you were describing now? And then after that, I document everything. I start creating the clean, let's say, diagrams. I go in a second session, and then I start asking about okay, does this represent what you want? I explain quickly how I draw these diagrams, and then I do a walkthrough. You can say yes or no. And at that point in time, you're calibrated. You know that we understand each other. And then I can go further and also addressing a question about the security aspects. I then also went in, with them to say, okay, how would you describe the most critical elements of your organization? And the subset attributes, they are subjective, but they help to I show the diagram. We browse through the operation side when it's customer oriented, or there's on operation side when it's when we speak about internal processes. But usually they know, like they say we need to be precise, or we need to be always available, or we may never make mistakes towards our customers, and that helps to also then start distilling what is really important to protect and how it should be protected, which leads in an informal way to control objectives. I didn't do COBITs because in the use cases I don't have time for that.
Okay, I think it's an extensive answer to the question, but there's one question, and I think that's for everybody that wants to ask that to you, Geert, because we have seen quite an extensive model. You did a thorough analysis on the model and on the application, but a good question from Koen was, how does this resonate with stakeholders? Isn't this too complex for a business environment?
What we need to do is when we collect all this information, there is indeed a very complex model that appears. And you cannot just share this model. What I did was to create a report out of the model And that report contains the business processes in the scope on a one-pager, the information diagram on another pager of A4, and then I described, let's say, the control objectives and how this should be implemented in the organization in different chapters in the report. And this is keeping the report on a concise level and avoiding 200 or 300 pager that is actually not maintainable. The diagrams themselves, they become complex, and yeah, you would need to maintain these, but the BIA is the actual outcome is a report. And that's the key element that the customer wants.
Yeah.
Because they want to have the understanding. They do not want to necessarily have the full documentation of their processes.
Okay, thank you. I see also a question for Tal, a very interesting one, because Tal, you elaborated on your journey as a runner, where I like the metaphor, because sometimes in business it also feels like that. And we have a question from Elchin Azizov. What do you think are the major sales points for cloud? Is it scalability, elasticity, availability, or switch to an OpEx model, or perhaps something else? What are the unique selling points for cloud, to your opinion?
Okay, yeah, obviously I don't think about cloud from a sales perspective, but I'll try to answer. I do think, yeah, of course there are many scenarios, and I must emphasize, I focus myself on established companies with a certain size, and not on startups, for instance. But I think the main thing you cannot, or two main things you cannot do with without cloud is really experimenting fast, using a myriad of technologies at very low cost, and only when you see that there is a real use case, real value, that you can scale it up, or in cloud or using other technologies. So it allows you to rapidly experiment. Another thing, but it totally depends also on your business. If you have a very volatile or fluctuating load, like suppose you have an e-commerce platform and it has between 0 and 20,000 users, also their cloud is very nice to accommodate this dynamic loads. So I think it's the pace you can experiment and try innovation before you scale it, and also if you deal with very fluctuating loads or applications or whatever, these are two of the many good selling points. I know, is that an answer to your question?
Well, there's an answer to the question, I think, but that's something that we need to check with the one who asked it, so Elsie is in, but perhaps he can reply in the chat. But thank you for your extensive elaboration. We're almost approaching the end. I think have one last question to you both, and that is also concerning the journey that you've made. So what is the main thing that you've learned from this research project, besides let's say the tangible fact of a thesis that you delivered? What did you gain out of this journey?
Is a question for Geert?
For Geert, yeah. Let's start with Geert, yeah.
Well, mostly I managed to put all the pieces together. When doing the master thesis and when doing the studies, you really collect all the information which you have and get the latest version, let's say the latest knowledge base, and therefore, and only then you can start putting things together and you get the necessary theoretical foundation so they understand why things are happening. When you're working, it's practical knowledge, you discover patterns, but with the master thesis and with the AMS track, also have understanding about the why. And that really helped a lot, also now in my career.
Good question from Gilbert as well. Was it difficult to combine work and studies? Perhaps Tal, you as a family man, was it hard to combine it? and running marathons?
Yeah, I felt in the running marathons, but I think hard to combine. I think At a certain point in time, you make a click because you just want to do something because it's interesting. But I must add, while we're all going to work 5 days a week, we get stuck in a default pattern. I think the benefits you get of being in a totally different environment with different people, not only from the practical side, but also from the academic side, you get new insights, and you can also apply them to your daily pattern is broken, and there is a lot of value. So from that sense, I would not say it's difficult to combine. Nevertheless, at the end of the road, while you have to write the thesis, it might be interesting to take some days off.
Yeah. So, good point, Tijl. Next time we have an also presentation from Antwerp Management School, and then Nico Kuiper will join and doing his presentation. And he did actually 3 masters at the Antwerp Management School, also with a family and also with working. So we also have people that do more. I would like to thank everybody in joining this webinar for today. It was a pleasure to do this for Isaka and for Norea. You've seen the QR codes, including the link, so you have access, but we'll provide additional footage of this recording, but as well from the slides that we've presented. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I would like to on behalf of Geert and Tel, have a great evening, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.